What's so great about Canada? What made you realize the power and opportunity that Canada has?
I think it's so multidimensional. I always think to myself after I answer this question, because I've been asked this so many times by my audience and other people on different interviews, and I feel that perhaps have you ever seen a blue rose?
I've not.
Okay, so I recently learned that blue roses don't exist in nature. They have to be essentially manufactured. So they're placed in this liquid with blue dye. So they eventually absorb it and then become kind of blue with that blue tint. So unlike red roses or white roses, they don't exist. They have to be made. They have to be seek. That's why a blue rose means impossible. It symbolizes stands for impossible or hard to find, something like that. So it's interesting how that story translates into my journey because I had lived in the US and I would say the US is like a red rose. It's something everybody knows about. It's classic. A lot of immigrants move there. So when I was little, I always had this American dream moving to the States. And then when it happened, I kind of like, I couldn't stay there, first of all, legally speaking, because of some implications. And then over time, I could have, but then I decided to just drop the idea because it's not essentially what people think it is. Not necessarily the best country. I had the I guess privilege to have compared different countries. I lived in New Zealand. I lived in the U.S., Ukraine, Europe, and I just realized that for me, Canada is that blue rose. It's hard to find. You have to kind of manufacture it just because it's not a lot of media around it. Like Canada is so under discovered, I think, compared to the States. Like there's so very little information on it. So
Do you
I
have
kind of
specific examples of like what kind of comparison, like the undiscovery of Canada compared to the States?
yeah, on the I guess if you talk about the immigration side of it, among immigrants who are outside both Canada or the US, when people talk about Canada, it's always like, they say it's just like the US but cold, or it's
Okay.
Toronto, Toronto. This
Yeah.
so it's just so little information, and then it's kind of like also wrong about it that it's like the US, or it's somewhat like the US but it's not the US. And then it's also, for example, people say like, oh, Canada, like it's hard to get a job there, to find anything. Things are overpriced. It's hard to, like, now there's this around inflation, there's this I guess misconception that it's very hard to make it in Canada, versus I think it's hard to make it anywhere. So the US is not this magical place where you get off the plane and then you get $1 million because you landed. It's different. Like it's not that,
Yeah.
and it's the same anywhere. You need to build for success. You need to add value before you can ask for anything, for rewards for that value, like money or anything else. So yeah, I think the biggest misconception is probably that in the US it's easy to make it as an immigrant, versus Canada is very expensive, hard, and impossible.